Let's talk to Mary Dejevsky, columnist on foreign affairs at The Independent. We saw this week Vladimir Putin and his kind of display on VE Day, effectively, of his military might, and a lot of people noticed that it didn't look as mighty as it once was. But let's find out whether assassinations, acts of sabotage and drone strikes on Russian soil are having any effect on him. Mary, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you too.
Thank you for talking to us this day. It's been an interesting time this week for matters arising from the Ukraine war. We've got some people over in Ukraine saying that, you know, the Ukrainian mission may not be going as well as everybody thought. Similarly, people in Russia saying, well, look at Putin's military might, it doesn't look like it used to. It's not, I think there was only one tank on display. Yes. But it did look a pretty sort of, you know, sinister kind of collection of people, didn't it?
No, I mean, you know, the marching and the formations were as impressive as they often are.
Yeah.
I did sort of ask myself why on earth they decided to put one tank on display, even if they only had one that wasn't in Ukraine. You know, it looked worse almost than not having a tank at all.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's all very well saying, oh, well, they're all in combat, but, you know, surely the point of combat is that you are constantly kind of recirculating vehicles and using them in other parts of the country. So, yeah, it was a strange look. But, I mean, it still, as you say, it still looked like a pretty powerful kind of procession, if you like.
Yes, and I think it was, you know, it was obviously curtailed this year. It was much shorter than it often is. Putin's speech was shorter than it often is. But I think that this reflects the security concerns of Russia to limit the opportunity for it to be disrupted or attacked. I mean, I think there was quite a lot of concern, but the show had to go on. I mean, not to have held it in Moscow would really have been a great sort of admission that things were really going absolutely as badly as the worst prognosis.
Yes.
So,
I mean, other things that were being said around it were that he didn't want to see too many kind of relatives of the dead, if you like, being paraded out there for some of the veterans who hadn't made it back from Ukraine.
No, I mean, I think, you know, that there are a lot of considerations as to why the Victory Day commemoration was as it was. And quite a lot of those relate to worries, not just in the Kremlin, but, you know, among senior Russians about the consequences of the war outside Ukraine.
No, exactly right. And what are these acts of sabotage and drone strikes and things? Because a lot of people have said to me that, you know, they can't really be anything other than sort of self-produced, if you want.
Yes, I mean, you know, we heard the sort of standard line, especially in the West, from the drones, the two drones that threatened the Kremlin, that these had to be a sort of false flag operation organized by Russia as an excuse for maybe reinforcements and increasing the targets inside Ukraine. I didn't really buy that, and I think in retrospect far fewer buy it than did at the time. But what is happening is that Ukraine, whether Ukrainian sort of freelancing, whether partisan groups, organized or less organized, whether operations sponsored by the Kiev government or operations that it likes to deny, all these things are going on. We've had now 3 assassinations or attempted assassinations inside Russia of really people with sort of nationalist Russian disposition who can be seen as spreading, if you like, the sort of the ideology that may be fueling Russia's war in Ukraine. We've seen acts of sabotage, actually, you know, a lot of small acts of sabotage that it's very difficult to tell whether they're coming from inside Russia Russia, from, say, opponents of the war, or whether they're coming from across the border in Ukraine. We've had, derailments of trains. We've had drone attacks on power stations, oil refineries, those sort of things, which actually are quite local in their significance and don't make the headlines from day to day. They're not like the assassinations and the assassination attempts, and they're happening mostly in areas close to the border. That's particularly true of the rail derailments. But we seem to be hearing more about these. More of these sort of things seem to be happening.
Right. And is it possible that some of these acts are being carried out by people perhaps who are from the nationalist side, who want to see more military blitzkrieg, if you like, for want of a better word, in Ukraine, that they don't think that Putin's pressing the foot down hard enough?
Well, you see, that's one of the interesting theories that you could actually apply to the assassinations and attempted assassinations, as I said, because the last one was actually unsuccessful against somebody called Zakhar Prilepin. But you could say that because it looks as though the main opposition to Putin and to the war in Ukraine within Russia is coming not from anti-war groups, but from people who think that Putin and the generals haven't been prosecuting the war nearly hard enough. And, that is the message that's been coming from some of these bloggers. So you could say, well, there's an argument there that actually the Kremlin has an interest in trying to silence them.
Yes.
Personally, I sort of doubt that, but, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's all smoke and mirrors, isn't it, at the moment? What news from Ukraine itself? Is there raging battles still going on in the east?
Well, the fate of this town called Bucha, which has been the centre of fighting for what seems like an age, this is still going on, and we're hearing completely conflicting reports from either side, because this seemed to be the centre of operations by the Russian sort of mercenary group led by somebody called Prigozhin, and he appears to have made various threats to pull out, saying he's not getting proper support from Russia, that he's not getting enough ammunition. Then he was going back in. It's not at all clear what the status of his troops is. We've heard claims from Ukraine just in the last couple of days that they've been making progress back towards the central part of Bucha. But it's very, very difficult to confirm this. And the actual danger of this was illustrated just in the last 48 hours, because a cameraman for AFP, the French news agency, was killed, it's said, by a Russian missile in the vicinity of Bucha. So it's not where the fighting is actually happening appears not to be consistent or predictable enough for people to be able to know where to be to keep safe. Right.
And we've just got Ben Wallace in the House of Parliament today promising to send more Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine, which are apparently longer range missiles. So today he's confirming that, Ben Wallace, Secretary of State for Defence. So I guess Vladimir Zelensky will be pleased about that.
Well, I should add a small comment about that, because it's interesting that the Defence Secretary is announcing this to the Commons, because the way it actually emerged was in the American press. It did not emerge in the British media, and there was no announcement before today to Parliament. And sending longer-range missiles to Ukraine is quite an upping of the assistance that the UK is giving. And, to my mind at least, and to some of us who think that maybe we should be doing more to advocate peace than continuing the war, this is not a particularly welcome development.
No, quite. Interesting. Mary, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Mary Dejevsky, columnist on foreign affairs at The Independent. That news just confirmed that Ben Wallace says that the UK is donating Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine, but as Mary says, that could be considered a bit of an escalation, militarily speaking.